It was a calm afternoon, and everything shifted in an instant. The sun dipped low over the quiet suburban town, casting long shadows on the trees and fields. Ethan had just wrapped up his day and stepped outside to soak in the tranquility of his surroundings. As he often did, his thoughts drifted to nature, the cheerful chirping of nearby birds and the soft rustling of leaves. But then he heard something unusual. At first, a faint cry pierced the stillness. He assumed it might be a distressed bird, but as the sound grew more urgent, Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. It wasn't a bird, it was a kitten's cry. He instinctively followed the sound, his heart racing as it became more distinct and frantic. There, at the edge of his porch, stood a mother cat. Her fur was tangled, and her eyes were wide with fear. In her mouth, she held something small and delicate, a tiny kitten barely clinging to life. The mother cat, Tess, looked at Ethan, her eyes reflecting the pain of a desperate situation. Without any hesitation, she stepped forward and gently dropped the kitten at his feet, as if she sensed that he could help. Ethan felt frozen, his heart pounding. The kitten appeared incredibly fragile, its tiny body trembling as it struggled to breathe. He quickly leaned down and scooped the little creature into his hands, aware that this moment would lead him on a path he never expected. "I never imagined I'd find myself in a situation like this," he thought as he gazed down at the delicate kitten. Its fur was dusty, and its eyes barely opened. Tess backed away slightly, her eyes locked on her baby, trembling as if the weight of her worry was too heavy to bear. The fear in her gaze spoke volumes. In his hands, the kitten felt impossibly light. Every rib was visible, each shallow breath a reminder of its struggle. Tess seemed to be waiting for him to act. As her anxiety filled the air, Ethan felt a blend of responsibility and helplessness wash over him. Before long, Mira arrived. She had been a friend for years, and together they had navigated plenty of rescue stories before. But even she took a moment to pause when she spotted Tess and the tiny kitten. "Ethan, this is..." Her words trailed off, revealing her surprise. "I've never seen anything like this." I nodded, too overwhelmed to say much. I think it's dying." I didn't want to speak the words, but the truth was hard to ignore. The kitten's breathing was shallow, and its little body barely moved. Mira quickly got to work, wrapping the kitten in a warm blanket and assessing the situation. Tess, however, wouldn't budge. She remained close, her eyes glued to her baby, almost as if she were waiting for someone to say it was okay to let go. My heart ached for her. The desperation in Tess's gaze mirrored my own fear for the kitten's life. Yet I also felt a bond with Tess. She had trusted me enough to come this far, and that trust felt heavy on my shoulders. As Mira focused on helping the kitten, Sophie arrived. She always had a bright outlook, but even she seemed unsettled by the kitten's condition. "We can save it, right? We've saved worse," she said, determination lacing her voice. I wanted to share that optimism, but deep down, I sensed this situation was different. This wasn't just another rescue. It felt significant. The following hours seemed to pass in a blur. Mira created a cozy spot for the kitten, carefully checking for any signs of life. Meanwhile, Sophie stayed by my side, offering words of encouragement, but even she understood the seriousness of our situation. Tess paced around us, her eyes wide with fear. Each time we made a move, she would inch closer, inspecting our work before retreating back to her corner, her anxious energy unmistakable. "Ethan, you need to keep an eye on her," Mira said, calm yet urgent as she worked. "She's watching you. You're the one she's turning to for help." I nodded, though I was unsure how I could protect her kitten. I was just a regular guy dealing with a cat crisis, not a miracle worker. The thought of saving it seemed daunting, yet Tess remained nearby, too protective for me to ignore. I felt a pang of guilt every time our eyes met. Sophie crouched next to me, her expression serious. "What if we need to call in more help?" she whispered. "Maybe from the shelter." "I don't think we have time for that," I interjected, my voice strained. "We'll do what we can here. If it's meant to be, maybe we can pull through." Mira looked at me with a serious expression. "But not every rescue ends the way we hope, Ethan." I glanced down at Tess, who was sitting nearby, her gaze focused but silent. Mira was right. Both the kitten's and Tess's futures were uncertain. There was no guarantee we could save them. The tiny kitten barely seemed to be responding, its movements slow and heavy, as if it was fighting to stay alive. Tess rubbed against my legs, looking for reassurance. Her eyes locked onto mine, and a heavy feeling settled in my chest. This situation felt different. It was more than just a rescue. It was a choice that tested who we were and who we could become amidst uncertainty. Should we take the kitten to the shelter? Did we have what it took to give both Tess and her baby the home they needed? Or would it be kinder to release them back into the wild, where they might have a better chance? Then there was the big question hovering over us. As a team, could we make the right decision when it was truly crucial? The next morning, everything changed. I woke up to soft meowing outside my window. At first, I thought it was a stray, but when I opened the door, I was surprised to find Tess there, looking more frantic than ever. She was accompanied by another kitten. This one looked even more fragile than the last. My heart raced as I rushed outside. Tess had left one kitten behind and was now carrying another tiny life that appeared just as sick. She gently placed the new kitten in front of me, and I felt a sinking sensation as I realized how bad it was. The kitten's breathing was shallow, its fur tangled, and its eyes barely open. I froze, unsure of what to do. Mira and Sophie appeared, and we all stood there, momentarily stunned. What did Tess know that we didn't? Was there more to this situation than met the eye? How had she found us again with yet another sick kitten? Mira quickly examined the new kitten, and her expression turned serious. "It's not good," she said quietly. "We might be too late." I could hardly wrap my mind around it. This felt more than just a coincidence. Tess seemed to know where to bring her kittens, and she trusted us with them. But why? What compelled her to seek us out not once, but twice in a single day? As these questions swirled in my mind, a new feeling emerged, a sense that we were part of something larger than a mere rescue effort. We found ourselves facing a bigger challenge than we had anticipated. It felt like a turning point, but whether it was a good thing or a bad thing was hard to say. Mira carefully cradled the new kitten as we all stepped back inside. The atmosphere was thick with uncertainty. Should we attempt to save both kittens, or would our efforts just prolong their struggle? Tess, the mother cat, lingered nearby, pacing restlessly. Even she seemed uncertain, trapped in a cycle of worry. It was as if we were all entangled in a silent dilemma, each of us searching for answers we didn't have. The fact that Tess had returned with another sick kitten shifted everything for us. Now we had to think about two lives rather than one, and our situation was definitely more complicated. As the weight of this reality settled in, we felt the tension grow. It was Mira who broke the silence, her tone steady yet laced with concern. "Ethan, this is overwhelming. We can't take in every stray or injured animal we encounter. The shelter is already stretched thin." Her words struck a chord. I understood the responsibility we were facing, but seeing two fragile kittens made everything feel daunting. I looked at Tess, who seemed to be watching us with a pleading gaze, her body tense with anxiety. It felt like she was waiting for a decision, but I didn't know what we could offer her. On the other hand, Sophie was already brainstorming solutions. "We can manage this," she said firmly. "We've rescued countless animals before. We'll find a way." Her unwavering optimism was encouraging, yet I couldn't shake the reality of the situation. The kittens were weak, and their chances of survival appeared slim. Could we truly succeed this time? Turning to Mira, I felt a surge of hope. "We can give it a shot, right? We have the means. We've accomplished it before." Mira let out a sigh and shook her head. "Ethan, you're not understanding. These cats, they're not like the others we've saved. They're too far gone. We might just be making their suffering last longer by intervening." Her perspective weighed heavily on me. I didn't want to abandon these kittens after all they had endured, yet Mira's concern made me question whether we were really helping them. In the midst of this, Tess suddenly settled down, her head drooping as if she sensed our internal struggle. It was clear that her trust in us was beginning to waver. She was starting to feel worn out, and I began to wonder if she was realizing just how serious things were. Sophie knelt beside me, her tone gentle. "We can't give up on them, Ethan. They really need us. I believe we can do this." But that raised a question. Could we? As the days passed, the thought lingered in my mind. The situation was more serious than I had thought, and I sensed our connection to the animals growing stronger. yet also more complex. I wasn't sure where this path was taking us, but it was clear that it wasn't solely about saving cats anymore. It was about something deeper, something filled with uncertainty. Just as we were grappling with how to move forward, things took a turn for the worse. One morning, a storm swept in unexpectedly. It was a fierce one. Heavy, dark clouds seemed to consume the sky. The rain poured down relentlessly, pounding against the windows and blurring everything outside. This sudden change in weather made everything feel urgent. The shelter we had hoped to reach was now cut off by flooded roads. Our home, while cozy, wasn't set up to provide the care the kittens required. Yet Tess showed no signs of leaving. She stayed close, always alert, always waiting. Mira, Sophie, and I scrambled to stabilize the kittens, but the storm outside was impossible to ignore. It felt as if the world was closing in on us, increasing our stress. There was no relief from the mounting pressure, both inside our home and from the storm beyond. Amid all this turmoil, a phone call interrupted us. It was the local animal control officer. "We've received a report of a wild cat colony near the river. They've been causing issues for local farms. We need to know if you're planning to keep the mother and her kittens. We can't have more feral cats in the area," he said, his voice tense. Those words struck me hard. I realized the situation was becoming even more complicated. Tess and her kittens were now at the center of a conflict between our desire to help and the growing pressure from the community. The officer didn't seem to care about the bond we had with these animals. His focus was solely on the bigger issue of wild cats being a problem. When Mira hung up the phone, her face was pale. "We need to make a decision," she said softly. "This isn't just about the kittens anymore. It's about Tess and her future too." The clock was ticking, and with each hour that passed, the storm outside continued to rage. This added pressure to our difficult decision. Were we truly helping Tess and her kittens, or were we potentially making things worse by keeping them in an uncertain environment? As I observed Tess, her weary expression reflected my own concerns. The turbulence outside seemed to echo our internal dilemma. Days rolled by, and the initial chaos of the storm gave way to a heavy silence within the house. While the rain had stopped, the atmosphere was thick with worry. The kittens were struggling, and Tess, who had once been so trusting, began to withdraw. She watched us from a distance, her gaze filled with resignation, as if she sensed our inability to save her young ones. I spent many hours sitting by Tess and her kittens, trying to offer comfort while a troubling question lingered in my mind. Were we genuinely acting in their best interests? What if our efforts were merely prolonging their distress in a place that wasn't right for them? Sophie was the first to articulate her concerns. "Ethan, what if we're only keeping them here for our own sake? What if our emotions are clouding our judgment about what they really need?" I could see tears gathering in her eyes, and it struck me how much she had always relied on hope. Yet now, even she was questioning our decision. Mira, too, seemed conflicted. She worked hard to remain practical, doing what needed to be done, but I noticed the uncertainty flickering in her eyes. She may not have been as emotionally invested as Sophie or I, yet her bond with the kittens was undeniable. As the days passed, her sense of responsibility felt increasingly burdensome. My own thoughts were just as tangled. Each glance at Tess filled me with guilt. Was I ready to put aside my feelings for their well-being? Or would I keep pushing forward, possibly complicating their situation further? One afternoon, I spotted Tess quietly observing her kittens from a corner. In that moment, it struck me. Perhaps Tess understood something we were yet to grasp. She had entrusted her young ones to us, hoping we would make the right choices for their future. What if letting go was the right choice? This question lingered in my mind. Could I truly set them free, knowing that whatever lay outside might be harsher than what they faced with us? But keeping them here wasn't simple either. There seemed to be no perfect answer. The emotional strain was beginning to weigh heavily on everyone, and we found ourselves torn between what was best for Tess and her kittens and what we needed for ourselves. Could we really set aside our own feelings for the sake of making the right choice? As the days became darker, so did our situation with Tess and her kittens. The looming storm was always there, but the emotional turmoil inside the house felt even more pressing. The more care we tried to provide for the kittens, the clearer it became that our options were dwindling. Tess was changing. She seemed more distant, as if she sensed our hesitation. That feeling was unsettling. It felt like she was withdrawing from us, both emotionally and physically. One evening, I sat in the living room, watching the kittens and questioning how much longer we could pretend we were in control. The house felt smaller and quieter, filled with the unspoken weight of decisions we hadn't made yet. Then something unexpected happened. I heard a faint scratching sound outside the door. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then it happened again, more persistent this time. My heart raced as I got up and opened the door. I was met by two glowing eyes. Two other cats, wild and thin, stood just outside. They hesitated, as if waiting for something. I froze, unsure of what to think. Were they here to join Tess? Or was this a sign that something else was happening? The newcomers didn't approach. Instead, they stood there, gazing into the house with a mix of curiosity and caution. I called for Mira, who hurried over, concern etched on her face. "What is it? What's happening?" I pointed to the cats outside. "They've been watching us. I can't shake the feeling that this isn't just a coincidence." Mira took a moment to assess the situation, her eyes narrowing in thought. "They're part of the colony," she finally said. "They've been keeping an eye on Tess, and now, it seems they're drawn to us." A shiver ran down my spine as I considered the two wild cats lurking outside. Were they part of a larger group? Had they been observing Tess, waiting for her return? Or was there something more threatening at play? It was hard to shake the feeling that we might be in deeper than we realized. Was this possibly a sign that things were spiraling out of control? Sophie, who had been quietly watching from the corner, finally spoke up, her voice trembling a bit. "What if they're not here to help? What if they want to take Tess and her kittens away from us? We might be getting caught up in something much bigger than we thought." With the presence of these wild cats, uncertainty stirred within us. They weren't just part of the landscape. They represented a much larger struggle that felt beyond our grasp. Questions lingered in my mind. Did Tess truly trust us, or was she leading us into a situation we couldn't manage? I found myself staring at the mysterious cats, their eyes glowing in the dim light, and I realized that the uncertainty was only growing. Answers seemed elusive. The wild cats didn't move away. They stayed just out of reach, watching us closely. Mira had attempted to approach them before, but they swiftly disappeared into the shadows. Their behavior felt intentional, like they were acknowledging us while still keeping their distance. It was a constant reminder that Tess and her kittens were involved in something much greater than themselves, and ignoring that reality was no longer an option. Tess's demeanor shifted as well. She grew quieter and more reserved, no longer pacing around to check on her kittens. It was as if an urgency had taken hold of her, a sense that something significant was on the horizon. I could feel her tension rise with each passing day, as if she was biding her time, waiting for the right moment to respond. The bond between Tess and her kittens also seemed more complicated. Dusty, the smaller kitten, appeared weaker with each day, while Shadow, the larger one, displayed more vitality. Shadow often snuggled against Tess for comfort, while Dusty remained distant, lying quietly in a corner, unresponsive to the warmth and attention we tried to offer. Watching this unfold was heartbreaking, yet it highlighted just how fragile our situation had become. One afternoon, while I sat by the fire with Sophie, Mira went to check on the kittens. When she returned, her face was pale, and I could tell something was amiss. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "I don't know how to say this, but Dusty's not responding. It's like he's given up." Her words struck me hard. "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "He's just lying there, hardly moving. His breathing is really weak. We can try to keep him warm, but I don't think he's going to make it." My heart sank. It was clear that this wasn't just a matter of will. Dusty had reached a point where his survival was no longer in our hands. His stillness spoke volumes. We were powerless to change his fate. Tess, however, wouldn't leave his side. No matter how involved we got, she stayed close to Dusty, gently nudging him in an attempt to rouse him. Watching her care for a kitten that seemed to be slipping away was heart-wrenching. On the other hand, Shadow appeared to be reacting differently. He would often come close, seeking comfort from us, yet I noticed a growing tension in his demeanor. Tess would gently push him away, almost as if trying to shield him from something. Was she aware of Dusty's fate and trying to protect Shadow from the same sorrow? The bond among Tess, her kittens, and the outdoor wild cats felt increasingly complex. Tess was gripping her little ones tightly, but something didn't feel right. Why had the wild cats shown up just then? And why had Tess brought her kittens to us if it only meant watching them suffer? The more we tried to intervene, the more I began to think Tess might hold insights we didn't understand, insights that could change our perspective on this entire rescue mission. As we sat in the house, the storm raging outside, an air of tension enveloped us. We were ensnared in a web of uncertainty, balancing our emotions between hope and despair. With every effort to help, it felt as though we were on the brink of losing everything. Days flowed into one another, and the weight of our situation was becoming unbearable. We were nearing a critical decision point, yet none of us seemed clear-headed enough to make it. Dusty's health continued to decline, and each passing moment made it harder to ignore the reality we were facing. He was slipping away, his little body growing colder despite the warmth we tried to provide. It was evident we were fighting a battle we might not win, but that didn't lighten the burden of our choices. Tess appeared to feel the heaviness too. She would stay close to Dusty, gently nudging him, but there was a noticeable shift in his spirit. The anxious, frantic energy she had when she first arrived had faded. Now she seemed almost resigned. Each time I looked at her, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. It was as if she had come to terms with their situation, and in her acceptance, my own feelings began to unravel. How could I possibly let her down now? On the other hand, Shadow was becoming more lively and curious. He wandered around the house, sniffing corners and exploring every nook, as if trying to understand his new surroundings. It was as though he was clinging to life in a way that Dusty couldn't. Yet, deep down, I knew we couldn't keep him forever. We couldn't save them both. Then, the next phone call brought everything to a head. The animal control officer was on the line again. "Ethan, I need a decision from you. You can't keep them there indefinitely. You'll need to either release them back to the wild, or we'll take them in. But just so you know, we're not equipped to handle cats in their condition." His voice felt detached and practical, as if all the care we had put into this situation was being reduced to a stark choice. Let them go or surrender them. I was at a loss for words. How could I possibly release them? How could I send Tess and her kittens back into the uncertain world when they had come to trust us? But if we didn't make a choice soon, we risked losing them in an even more devastating way. Sophie, standing quietly beside me, finally spoke up. "Ethan, we can't hold on to them forever. I know this feels like a failure, but maybe it's time to let them go. Perhaps this is the only way for them to be free." Her words resonated louder than the officer's demand. I turned to her, then looked at Tess, who watched us with pleading eyes. How could I make this choice? How could I choose between protecting them and setting them free? Was it right to keep them here, knowing the weight we were under? Mira, who had been deep in thought, finally chimed in. "You know what you need to do, Ethan. This decision may not be easy, but it's necessary. The longer we wait, the harder it will become for all of us." She was right. Each day that passed felt like a missed opportunity, another moment inching closer to a choice I wasn't prepared to make. The tension in the room had peaked, and it was clear that no matter what we decided, the outcome would be unpredictable. The future felt unclear, and it seemed there were more questions than answers lining the path ahead. I glanced down at Dusty, fragile in my hands, then looked toward Tess, who was waiting patiently. A choice lay before me, and its weight was almost too much to bear. The atmosphere in the room was tense as the decision hovered over us. Mira and Sophie were nearby, their eyes fixed on me, eager for a resolution. Tess, usually composed in her sorrow, now gazed at me with an intensity that seemed to ask, "What will you decide?" My hands shook as I cradled Dusty, the tiny kitten whose life was fading before I could intervene. He felt so small, yet the burden of his fragile existence was heavier than I had anticipated. Breaking the silence, I heard Mira say, "Ethan, it's time to decide. Are we letting them go or sending them to the shelter?" Panic surged in my chest. "I don't know," I replied softly. "I just can't figure out what's best." Sophie's voice broke through. "This decision isn't just about us, Ethan. It's for them too. Tess depends on us. Dusty's condition is critical, and while we can't change that, Shadow deserves a chance to thrive." Tess let out a low, mournful meow, an expression of need I struggled to interpret. She approached Dusty, nudging him gently, but he didn't react. It seemed she understood the gravity of the situation, and I felt a deep sense of helplessness on her behalf, caught in circumstances beyond her control. I longed to assure her everything would turn out fine, yet uncertainty weighed heavily on my heart. Mira sighed in frustration, clearly fighting to stay composed. "We're not helping anyone by delaying this. We need to release them. Their survival depends on the wild, not here with us." Her words struck deep. I wasn't ready to let them go, especially after the effort we had put into saving them. However, Mira had a point. We might not be the best option for their future. Tess and her kittens were wild at heart, not suited for a home, no matter how much we wished for a different reality. The phone call from the animal control officer had rattled me. "Release them or surrender them," echoed in my mind like an unyielding command. It felt like a heavy ultimatum, and with it came a sense of burden that rested squarely on my shoulders. Could I really let them go? What about Tess's trust? Standing there, caught between my feelings and the reality of the situation, a new idea popped into my head. Perhaps the key wasn't just about what we could do for them, but rather what we could provide. Freedom. The chance to survive on their own. Dusty might struggle, but Shadow could manage. Tess could too. They needed to return to their own lives, no matter how difficult that decision would be for me. As I silently made the choice, my heart felt heavy. "We need to release them," I said softly, almost to myself. Sophie and Mira paused for a moment, taking in the weight of what we were deciding. Then they nodded in agreement. This wasn't the choice any of us wanted, but it was the right one to make. Tess let out one last gentle meow, and as I opened the door to let them outside, I experienced a mix of sadness and relief. I was letting them go, not out of desire, but necessity. Watching Tess and Shadow fade into the night brought home a truth. Sometimes the toughest decisions lead to the greatest sense of peace. As the door clicked shut behind me, I felt the heaviness of our choice settle around me like a thick fog. I glanced back at the spot where Tess and Shadow had vanished, their forms swallowed by the dark. A wave of finality washed over me. Tess had trusted us to make things better, and now we had to send her back to a world we could never truly shield her from. Yet, there was an uncomfortable thought nudging at my mind. I had let them go, but was that really the right decision? I couldn't shake the worry that they might not be ready for this. Shadow, being the stronger of the two, would have to navigate the wilderness alone. And what about Tess? Did she truly understand what we were doing? My certainty had eroded. I had hoped that granting them freedom would lead them to their rightful place in the world. But as I stood there, I was left with an unsettling question. Would they manage without us? Turning back toward the house, I felt the emptiness more pronounced as I closed the door. The silence hung heavily in the air. Sophie had been beside me the entire time, but she hadn't spoken since we let them go. I could see sadness mirrored in her eyes, a reflection of the grief we all shared. "Do you think they'll be okay?" she finally asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," I said quietly, staring out into the dark, empty space where they had been. "I hope so. I really hope they find their way." I honestly didn't have the answers. The futures of Tess, Shadow, and even Dusty felt uncertain, like unanswered questions hanging in the air. We had tried our best. We opened our hearts and offered them opportunities for a better life. But ultimately, the outside world was beyond our control. It was no longer up to us. Mira approached and placed her hand on my shoulder. "You made the right choice, Ethan," she said gently. "You gave them a chance. That's all anyone can do." While her words provided some comfort, they couldn't completely ease the emptiness I felt inside. I was left wondering about Tess and Shadow's futures. Was there even such a thing as a perfect decision? Often, life offers us choices where all we can do is take the next step, even when we are unsure of the road ahead. As days went by, I reflected on our shared journey, the challenges, the uncertainty, and the emotional weight it had carried. I couldn't help but think about where Tess and Shadow might be now. Were they thriving somewhere in the wild, or had their story reached a conclusion we couldn't have anticipated? It was hard to say. What became clear, however, was that we had been transformed by this experience. We learned more about ourselves, about what it means to sacrifice, and about the unpredictability of rescue work. Some journeys provide clear answers, while others leave us with more questions than resolutions. Standing there, at the spot where Tess and Shadow had disappeared, I was swept up in a mix of emotions. A heaviness settled in my chest, refusing to let go. I had chosen to let them go, yet the ache from that decision lingered. The stillness of the night echoed the quiet in my heart. Had I truly made the best choice for them, or had my own fears clouded my judgment? Just as I thought I had come to terms with my decision, I heard something. In the distance, a faint cry disrupted the silence, a soft but distinct sound, a kitten's cry. I felt my heart race. Could it be Tess or Shadow? I held my breath and turned toward the sound, a flicker of hope igniting within me. It was impossible. They were supposed to be gone, free to wander. But then I heard it again, a cry. I hurried toward the sound, with Sophie and Mira right behind me. The moonlight guided us along the path, casting long shadows among the trees. And then I saw her. Tess stood at the edge of the woods, her eyes filled with alarm. She was completely alone. Shadow was missing, and so was Dusty. When she looked at me, I could see the fear in her trembling body. Why had she come back? Was she seeking help, or had she returned because she felt she couldn't leave us behind? As I moved closer to her, my heart raced. I knelt down to her level, and to my relief, she didn't run away. It was as if she was waiting for me to respond. Sophie spoke first, her voice soft and uncertain. "Ethan, what should we do now? She's back." I wasn't sure how to reply. I had let Tess and Shadow go, believing it was the best choice. But now Tess was here again, looking for our support. The choice I faced wasn't just about her and her kittens. It was about us too. With a deep breath, I stood up slowly, feeling the gravity of the decision weighing on me. My gaze met Tess's, and in that moment, it became clear what I needed to do. I reached out my hand, and she stepped forward, pressing her head into my palm, silently asking for help. This wasn't just a question of whether we could save them. It was about the trust we had built together. Tess had come back to us, and turning her away was not an option. Without thinking twice, I picked Tess up and headed back toward the house. Shadow would find his own way in time, but Tess had chosen us again, and that was something I couldn't ignore. We would help her and her kittens, no matter how challenging the journey might be. In the days that followed, life felt calmer. Welcoming Tess back wasn't a simple choice, but it felt like the right one. We had done our best for her and her kittens, and now she was placing her trust in us again. The frantic, fearful mother I had first seen at my door was gone. Tess was now more relaxed and at ease while still remaining vigilant. As for Shadow, he had vanished into the wild, just as I had hoped. I often wondered if he was managing well out there, finding his way as he was meant to. The memory of Dusty lingered too. His fragile life slipping away despite our efforts was a painful reminder of how much we cannot control. Yet Tess's return felt like a step toward healing. We were all figuring out how to adjust to the unfamiliar. She didn't need us to fix everything, but by taking the chance to help her, we found our own healing too. It was enlightening to realize that rescue is more than just saving someone. It's about offering opportunities for growth, even if the future remains uncertain. Looking back, I recognize that our journey wasn't flawless. There were many questions and not enough answers, and often more questions than resolutions. Perhaps that's the essence of rescue. It's less about the perfect ending we imagine and more about the path we take, the connections we forge, and the choices we make along the way. As I think about Tess and Shadow, I can't predict their futures. They may find new homes or return to the wild, choosing their own destinies. But whatever happens next is theirs to navigate. What matters is that our lives intertwined, sharing experiences that have shaped us. One truth has emerged from this experience. Sometimes, the right choice isn't the one that seems most promising. It's the choice that resonates with our hearts, even when clarity eludes us. Now, as I sit here watching Tess snuggle by the fire, I accept that this story might not have a tidy conclusion. The future remains unpredictable, but that's part of the journey of rescue. It's filled with uncertainty, hope, and the vibrancy of life. Reflecting on Tess's trust in us and the unexpected events we faced, it becomes clear that rescue goes beyond saving lives. It involves making difficult decisions and recognizing that some factors are beyond our control. Although Tess and Shadow's futures are unknown, we've done our best, and the lessons learned will stay with us. If you found this story meaningful and want to see more, please like, share, and subscribe. Join me as we continue this journey together. Your support is invaluable, and together, we can keep sharing these moments of connection. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next time.